Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, it's time for another installment of Book Chat. Jennifer and I are talking about Gabor Mate's book with his son, Daniel Maté. Don't want to leave him out. Called The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. Y'all, buckle up. It's a significant book. It's dense. It's got a lot in it, and it will bring up lots of feelings, thoughts, all the things. For y'all, I'm sure, but definitely for myself and Jennifer. And if anybody has read this book prior to listening to this episode, please let us know, because I really want to know other people's experiences with this book. So anywho, so Jennifer, why did you want us to read and talk about this book?
Oh, that's a really good first question that I hadn't thought we would be talking about, but I heard Gabor on many of the podcasts / YouTube stuff that I listened to or watch, and saw lots of clips of him on TikTok speaking about this book. And what really drew me in was that he kept talking about addiction, which you all know by this point, both my brother and sister suffered from. And he also talked a lot about ADHD, autism, the neurodivergencies. I am now a self-diagnosed ADHDer. Well, I should say daughter diagnosed / self-diagnosed ADHDer. The more my girls, my niece, my family talk about it, we think that the majority of us in our family either have ADHD or on the autism spectrum. Hearing all those clips, etc., one of the things that he talked about that was very compelling to me was that he described them all rather than like a medical situation or a disability situation. He described them all as coping mechanisms, coping mechanisms that stemmed from childhood. And because my brother and sister were alcoholics and I have the ADHD, and I think my mom does too, I was really intrigued by like how our brain creates these coping mechanisms, what they did for us. And I've also spent many, many years trying to understand my sister and specifically her addiction. And I will say this book did not disappoint. I'm going to throw that out there right away. I did get a lot of answers to the questions I was seeking. So,
oh, good. If you don't mind talking about it, what were some of the answers that you received?
I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. I had said, because my brother and sister, and there were 3 of us, both suffered from alcoholism or drug addiction, etc. Whereas a lot of times they will ask that question, why me? Why me? They both died. For people who don't know, they both died many years ago. I'm talking about it rather flippantly. It's not flippant. It was traumatic. I spent many years asking the question, why not me? Why am I not an alcoholic? Why am I not a drug addict? I realize now, and I've said this before, I have many other addictions, like workaholism was an addiction of mine. But I think that in reading this book, and Gabor specifically talks about his own childhood and his own childhood patterns and how these things came to be coping mechanisms for him, what I realized was the child's mind, the childhood coping mechanisms, they protect us. They protect us from what's happening. They give us as much information at a time as we can handle. And so for me, with my ADHD, that was my way of disassociating a little bit with what was going on so that I could bring in as much information as I could handle at a time. And then I would hyperfixate on whatever I was doing. So I didn't have to observe what was happening in my household, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
For my brother and sister with their alcoholism, it was a way to ease the mind and escape the reality. And I guess now that you've asked this direct question right from the bat, The one thing that I wish that I could go back and change in our family history, besides all the trauma, etc. But by the way, everybody has trauma.
Yeah.
But the one thing I wish I could change is we spent many, many years, not purposely so, but we did anyway, shaming my brother and sister for drinking or doing drugs or whatever it was. Like, I mean, that was culturally, we all did that. We said that alcoholic either makes bad choices. You're making bad choices. You're doing this to yourself. Stop doing it.
Yeah.
Well, the fact of the matter is,
I've said the same thing.
Right. We all have. That's culturally how we understand these bad choices or this disease. But what I've realized is if I could do it again, knowing what I know now, which of course you never can turn back the clock like that, but if I could, I would say to my sister, I can see that alcohol is a coping mechanism for you. You go ahead and use that. You go ahead and do it. And I will help you and support you and we will work on it. But let's get to the root of why. What is it that needed this coping mechanism? Let's work on that in the hope that one day you won't need that coping mechanism anymore, or at least not so much, or at least not in absence of everything else that could be good in your life. Would that have worked? I don't know. But it seems like it would have been an approach that's more like, how can I support you, rather than, as Brene Brown says, shame does not work in any situation. When we push shame on people, it only pushes them into a deeper, darker spiral that creates more usage.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Boy, I did not expect to dive right in there.
We are not wasting any time, people.
Woo, feet first. Well, my initial question was just going to be around that. In the title, he says, trauma, illness, and healing in a toxic culture. And one of the very important first things he says in the book, or points he makes, he and his son, Daniel, is that we are in a toxic culture. That's the first thing we need to recognize, no matter where we are, or what we're living, or how did that strike you?
In some ways, it was, duh, of course we are. Of course it's a toxic, right.
We only talk about it every episode.
Yeah, exactly. I only think about it like almost every day. Hello, my eyes are open. I see that we live in a toxic culture. What it brought up for me is that what's normal is not necessarily good for us, right?
Bingo.
Right. What we consider normal in this culture, in this time, is totally fucked up. In fact, I was like taking notes as I was reading. And one of the things that I typed out was, everything that is normal / normalized is fucked up. So don't strive to be normal.
Oh my God. What if you had heard that when you were a kid?
I think that would have helped me so much. That would have stemmed so much of the, not to be dramatic about it, but a lot of the internal suffering that I dealt with, judgments that I put on myself, judgments that I put on my family, judgments that I drummed up in my head that, oh, my family's different, or I'm different, so I'm bad and nobody's gonna love me and they're going to judge me and my family. And I mean, that would have stemmed a lot of that. I don't know if it would have gotten rid of it completely. I think it would have helped me to not give as much of a shit about what other people think.
No, because you would have realized right then and there that their ass wasn't normal either.
Right, exactly. And that normal isn't something we necessarily need to strive for.
No, what is normal?
Well, in our culture right now, normal is
white supremacy.
Well, yeah, partly, but I think it's also, normal is disconnected from self. It's inauthentic.
Yes.
It's living on autopilot. It's not looking at and supporting and questioning and caring for self. Because I mean, as individualistic as our society is, meaning like Western society, Western culture, there's very little emphasis on taking care of self. It's all, I'm out for me, I'm out for me, I'm out for number one, blah, blah. If I can do it, anybody can do it. It's that shit, but it's not, let me look at the shit that's going on with me, and let me look at how I am or am not coping with things, and let me see what am I numbing myself from, and how am I numbing, and then there's the idea or the sort of shaming that if you do spend time on yourself that you're selfish. And so it's this weird dichotomy that we live in, i.e. hello, toxic culture that we live in. And so yeah, in varying and different ways and degrees, we're kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Capitalism is the big, I mean, I'm realizing this more and more every day. It kind of, well, he said this thing in the book, and I said this to my daughter yesterday. He was talking about advertising, capitalism, etc., the way we live our lives. And he said, advertisers don't need to know what's right with the product they're selling. They only need to know what's wrong about the buyer. Yeah. And so everything we're sold or told or is presented to us is pushing on the deep fear of what is wrong with us, or how can I be normal? How can I have
what am I missing? What can I get that'll make me like whoever they are, whoever the ideal is?
Maybe the product isn't even good. Like Coca-Cola, what was their old slogan?
Oh, have a Coke and a smile.
Have a Coke and a smile. Coca-Cola is a chemical concoction that kills us. And granted, I've had my own addiction to Diet Coke, so I'm not going to judge anyone. It took a long time to break that addiction because it tastes good, right?
Yeah.
But it's a chemical concoction of sludge that's not good for our bodies. Yeah. But we associated Coca-Cola with happiness. So the Coca-Cola advertisers were like, what are people missing? They're missing a smile. They're missing joy. They're missing happiness. We'll tell them it's in this bottle of Coke.
Yeah.
And we drank it.
Yeah. With a smile.
Yeah.
By the way.
Put a little Jim Beam in there and we're all good. Right?
Yay for numbing. Yay.
The second thing he brought up was talking about, as a medical doctor or medical doctors that he'd worked with, they weren't really questioning patients behind defining like, what are your symptoms and like, what's your medical history?
Yeah. What's your home life?
Well, that's what he was proposing we start to get into. We go further back. We look at, okay, someone comes in and they have a kid who has an attention deficit disorder, maybe not diagnosed as ADHD, but they can't sit still in class or whatever it is they want them to do, right? So they bring the kid in and the doctor is asking, well, what are the symptoms? Well, what is it's going on? My kid can't sit still. They can't pay attention. They're not doing their homework. They maybe go over like a quick medical history, but they're not looking back far enough into what is actually going on in the family, being the main point. And he even brings up that some of that happens even before us. Like my own attention deficit is probably partially my mom's attention deficit disorder.
It kind of makes me think, because we talk about intergenerational trauma and intergenerational, other things like family traits or parts of your personality. It's not, intergenerational is not just about trauma. It can also be about other things. But what Gabor brings into focus is your life doesn't exist in a vacuum. What happened to your ancestors, and I don't mean far back, like your parents or your grandparents, like what he was saying about his grandparents dying in Germany as part of the 6 million Jews who were killed. He was carrying that. He wasn't even born yet, and he's carrying it. it makes me want, like, what am I carrying?
Okay.
Right? Like, what am I carrying from my mom and my dad and my grandparents?
But can't you, after reading that, can't you kind of guess about that? Because I certainly think of like the trauma that I got from my mother. And I'm guessing it was religious trauma because my
Mhm.
mom was raised Catholic. She had a lot of expectations on her as women did in the day.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to live up to those. So I never felt it. But the more I delve into this, I feel like some of that religious trauma has had its grip on me, even though I didn't
In
understand
what
it.
way? In what way? How is that manifesting for you?
Oh boy, you are putting me through the ringer, Raquel. All right. So I talked to somebody in therapy about this the other day. So my mom, and this is one of the things that irks me to no end. I have always felt, because I witnessed it as a child, my mom was vivacious and full of life, and she was a sexual being, and she had boyfriends, and she was exciting, and men desired her, and she was fucking punished for that. She was punished over and over and over for that. And even the men who were fucking her called her promiscuous.
Ugh.
They weren't promiscuous, but
No, it's
she
always
was.
the woman that's promiscuous, never the
Exactly.
man.
And I believe that that is part of the religious trauma. So in my own life, because my mother was seen that way, I denied those aspects of myself. That doesn't mean I wasn't sexual. I just didn't let anybody know about it. I kept everything secret and hidden. And, you know, when I got HPV, I was like devastated because I didn't want people to think, oh my gosh, she's had more than one partner.
Right.
Fucking A, right? I
Right.
believe that is that religious trauma from my mother.
Mm.
And it still pisses me off because my mother was a light in this world and that should have been celebrated.
Mhm.
Okay, now we're taking me off the hook and we're putting you on.
Oh shit.
Yeah, because that's about all I can say about that today. There's a lot more to say about that. Religious trauma is big, even if we're not part of it. But now,
True that. True that.
now, how does your family trauma come through you? You must have some inkling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably comes through in ways that I'm not even aware of, right? Like I sometimes wonder if the way that I am, my quote unquote personality, as Gabor puts it, which isn't really our personality, it's our conditioning. I think it's conditioning plus personality, but anyway, whatever.
And a mask.
And a mask, yeah, is a result, maybe a direct result of my mom and my grandma and what they went through. Meaning, and two things come up immediately. Oh crap, I can feel the tears coming up. Shit.
I knew it. I knew it was in there.
Damn it. The first thing being romantic relationships with men. My mom was married a few times before she married our dad. Like your mom, a beautiful, vibrant, intelligent, big heart, lovely woman, beautiful, smart, like your mom, a light in this world, right? And people are drawn to my mom. But I feel like my mom has, and probably still does, she goes through life with a mask. There's only so much as far as like relationships with men. You know, my mom's previous marriages obviously didn't work out because she married our dad. That marriage didn't work out. Not my mom's fault or not anybody's fault. I mean, marriages break up for numerous reasons. In that situation, because my dad's an asshole. But anyway, got to get that dig in. And afterwards, my mom had two very serious relationships that could have resulted in marriage, but my mom said no. My grandma, my mom's mom, never married. In fact, my grandma's sisters, even as recently, or one of them even as recently as like, 10 years ago, was like, you don't need a man. You don't need to get married. And I'm like, oh God, okay. This woman's like almost as old as Jesus and she's telling me not to get married. And then fast forward to me, at 53, not married, never been married, haven't had a whole lot of success in relationships. Like probably all of my relationships have been, my romantic relationships have been rather inauthentic and unsuccessful, partly because I was choosing the wrong men, and because I've never truly been completely 100% myself in a relationship. And so I wonder if some of and now I'm at a point where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to get married. I don't know if marriage is in the cards for me. I don't know if marriage is even anything that I want anymore. There's also part of me that thinks that a romantic relationship, a true, authentic, supportive, mutually beneficial, supportive, whatever relationship, is not going to happen. And so I wonder if where I am now, as a result of these generations of women who, although, I mean, no shade on these women, I mean, strong, independent, beautiful, vibrant, capable women, but I wonder if, like, my mom always told me growing up, don't get married before you're 30, which she did. And by the way, I mean, those marriages didn't last very long, any of them. I kind of took that to heart. I mean, I'm 53 and I'm not married, almost 54. So I think that's one of the intergenerational things that I'm carrying somehow. Not that anybody ever told me, don't get married, men are awful, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that, but I think that's just something that I carry. I think it's a manifestation of all of that.
But you heard the message, whether they said it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's look at our mom's generation, because as you were saying this, I felt myself crying, feeling that same trauma.
Yeah.
Because our moms went through Feminism 101. They learned that they could support themselves. They had jobs. They weren't dependent on a man for money and security. However, they still tried these relationships, but these relationships were, in my opinion, not satisfying, probably to the male or female, but we're female, so let's just go there.
Yeah.
We learned the message somehow that we're not getting what we need from these relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's also all this bullshit about there that I read for years and years in magazines about how to hook a man, be your inauthentic self, play these games, do this stuff. I always refuse to do that outright bullshit. I'm not going to do that. The man needs to know the real me.
Yeah.
But then I, like you, question myself, and I'm like, did I ever actually even show anyone the real me? Did I ever, I think I hit it. Did I ever trust a man enough to show him the true me?
Yep. I can answer that question in a definite no, I never did. I have not ever been in a romantic relationship where I trusted the man enough to show my full self. And in fact, I can even go as far as to say that in most of my friendships, even, it is rare that I can show my complete self, because I'm afraid, oh Lord, that I'm gonna be judged and that people won't love me. Shit. So this is let's just throw it all out there. Woohoo!
Hey, you said at the beginning this book
brought up some shit, people. So the second thing that it brought up for me, as far as like the intergenerational stuff, he brought this up kind of toward like the second half of the book, like kind of almost toward the end, where he would talk about, like people would say, oh, I had a happy childhood, blah, blah, blah. And then they go further into it and they're like, well, shit, I wasn't happy at all. And
yeah,
like there was some shit there. And I literally have never described my childhood as happy. There's a lot of shit. Yes, I grew up with lots of love. Like I've never doubted that my family loved me. That's not it. There was a lot of small T trauma. There was a lot of movement. There wasn't a lot of routine. There wasn't a lot of being rooted somewhere. There wasn't like a stable foundation in however you want to define that. But the one thing that got to me in this book, and it's like, fuck, he asked somebody, when you were a little kid, who did you talk to when you felt bad? And I was like, oh, hell. I didn't talk to anybody when I felt bad. I don't remember any conversations with any of the adults in my life about me feeling bad about something, like actual, like, what are my feelings? And when I think about it, I think about my mom. Who has my mom had those conversations with? Has my mom had those conversations? Did my grandma? Probably not. That's even hard for me now. I am 53 years old. I'm a fucking adult. And it is hard for me to talk about, like, I literally doing it now. I'm like, I'm basically I don't know, teary mess over here. And that just makes me think, like, so many of us are going through the world and growing up, and little kids who are growing up, who do they talk to when they feel bad? As a little kid, like, there's all kinds of things that, make you feel bad. Like, a little kid in school was mean to you, or I don't know, your cat wouldn't let you pick her up, or your friend was in a bad mood and that made you feel bad. But I have no conversations like that I can point to where there was a grown-up who's like, how are you feeling? What's going on with you? What are your feelings about XYZ? Like, and don't get me wrong, I've always been able to have, like, big conversations with my mom. We could talk about all the issues and the things of the day and blah, blah, blah. And I knew that there was nothing I could do that would make my mom stop loving me, and like the big things, but it was the little things that weren't there. And this is no shade on my mom. My mom is not the only parent who
didn't know how to do it.
Right. They didn't ask their kids, hey, little kid, how are you feeling? I don't think very many of us have had that experience growing up. And my mom didn't have it. My grandma probably didn't have it. In fact, I'm sure my grandma didn't have it. There was one point where in one of the anecdotes, he talks about somebody says that there's so much they don't remember from their childhood. He said, it's not that it's a missing memory, it's that it's covering up pain. Which made me think, because there's so much of my childhood I do not remember. Like,
me neither.
Like, and I'm pretty sure, like, I have even said that I purposely blocked some things out. And I think I said these things without a full realization of it being that my little kid brain was trying to protect me. I think I literally was just like, I don't want to remember that.
Okay,
like
but hence back to this whole idea of our little kid brain can only handle so much.
Yeah.
So we put in place these coping mechanisms. In my case, it's the ADHD behavior, the inability to focus or pay attention to things I don't want to see. I just don't see them. Therefore, I don't remember them because I didn't even look. Right.
Yeah.
And my ability to super focus on something to divert my attention.
Yeah.
Or my workaholism, or my sister's alcoholism, or my brother's alcoholism. And we can do this without it being a full-blown ADHD or a full-blown alcoholism. We can use alcohol. I've certainly used sugar. No question in my mind about that.
Yeah.
We can use shopping. We can use TV. We can use our iPhones. We can
There's so many ways we can numb ourselves. So many.
But what I want to say about that is that doesn't make us a bad person. That means we figured out a coping mechanism that may or may not serve us anymore.
Right.
It may still serve us. We may still need a coping mechanism until we get to the bottom of the shit. We may still need that to function properly.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make us a bad person.
Right. Right.
That's what I want to say to my brother and sister. You were not bad people. You didn't deserve shame. You were coping the best you could. That's what I've learned from this book. And it fucking breaks my heart. And when you said that thing about who did you talk to? Well, the first thing that popped into my mind was my mom. So I'm sure I did talk to my mom. But my mom never came to me and said, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
That's like, no. No. Parents in the 70s and 80s, they didn't know how to ask us how we were feeling.
Yeah.
And when I try to ask my kids that, I ask my kids, they come in the door, they get pissed at me because I'll go, how are you feeling? Are you hungry? Do you want something to eat? What did you? And they're like, shut up, Mom.
They're like, let me get through the door.
Right. So like, there's no perfect in this.
No, not at all. Of course. And then there's this reflexive part of me that just wants to say, I'm not saying my mom didn't and doesn't care about me. My mom does ask me how I am.
You always protect your mom that way.
I know. And
you are a loyal daughter. You protect your mom.
So many ways. I do try. Oh God, this book just brought up so much, and kind of going deeper into the whole coping mechanism thing. And this is another thing that came up for me. I was a little apprehensive about reading the book.
Me too.
Because and for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons why I was apprehensive, because of the whole conversation around mental illness and medication and that sort of thing. And I went into this with all kinds of preconceived notions that he was going to be like, mental illness is a construct and you don't need medication and medication is evil and blah, blah, blah. And I literally was just like, well, I mean, I went in walls up, like ready to fight. Like, depression is real, motherfucker. Medication is needed. Blah. Like, I was ready to fight. Basically, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying, well, let me put it this way. What he made me think was, when I first started going to therapy and when I first started sort of utilizing the label depression and applying it to myself, was during a time of extreme emotional upheaval for me. And I didn't know how to cope with it. I was feeling a lot of really, really big, scary feelings that in some ways were in danger of incapacitating me. And I didn't have the coping skills to work through any of that. So I went to therapy. I can't say that I necessarily learned the coping skills that I needed, because, who does at 19? I did have an outlet for talking about it that felt safe. And I did get the medication which I didn't start medication at 19, it was sometime after, but it at least gave me an outlet that I didn't have before, so that I wasn't completely incapacitated, so that the coping mechanisms that I did use to numb it so that I could function didn't completely take me under. Because there, but for the grace of God, I could have been an alcoholic. I could have succumbed to any number of addictions that could have not just numbed me, but could have put me in a very, 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 very dark spot. All of this has me thinking, is this really depression? Which, yes, I'm sure it is to some degree, but is it just that? Is it also that I don't have the coping mechanisms in place yet to help me? Will there be a time when I won't have to utilize medication and or therapy? Will there be a time when I will have the coping mechanisms that will help me deal with the big feelings and the big emotions and the self-limiting beliefs that threaten to sort of derail me from time to time?
Well, that's a big fucking question, Raquel.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that question. I don't think he has the answer to that question.
Yeah, I certainly don't.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think in any way did he imply that people shouldn't use medication if medication is necessary.
Right.
And I don't think in any way did he say that we can forever be cured of our coping mechanisms. And I don't think in any way did he say that there's a single one of us walking around that doesn't have some sort of addiction or coping mechanism that we use.
Yeah.
And it's just that society sees some of them as a problem and some of them not as a problem. The workaholic
Is celebrated,
yet they can be busily neglecting their own needs and their family's needs.
Yep.
But they're celebrated because they're cha-ching, bringing in the cash, or they're climbing the corporate ladder. But that doesn't make that coping mechanism any more mind-numbing. When I went through my divorce, I remember feeling like work was my outlet. I could go to work. I could work hard all day. I was so busy. I didn't think about anything. That's a fucking coping mechanism. I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
Is depression right or wrong? Your body, the body keeps the score. The body knows, the body feels. Your body is telling you at some point something was off, didn't feel good to you. Is that a bad thing?
No, it's our warning system.
Exactly. Okay, so on that same regard, he said, trauma alienates us from the present. If it alienates us from the present, that's what we're talking about. So that's why we don't remember. That's why that's why I went to work. It alienated me from everything else that was going on.
Yeah.
Okay, and now I want to delve into something that's kind of controversial.
Okay.
Okay, so his book.
The look on your face is like, here we go.
Okay, because I've been thinking about a lot about this. And I want to preface it with, I don't want to put the blame on anybody for anything that they are experiencing, like depression. You from time to time experience depression. I'm not putting the blame or the onus on you for that.
Right.
Even though what I'm going to say, sometimes people say, oh, you're blaming that. But what I wanted to say is this book, The Myth of Normal, really reminded me of this book that I read when I was a teenager. And this is called You Can Heal Your Life. The premise of this book is that everything that's going on with you physically is because of some emotional blockage. Kind of similar to what he's saying, that any alcoholism, ADHD, etc., is because of something that happened and we're doing a coping mechanisms. Right. They have this similarity that I'm trying to get to. I started to think about it. I went to the store to get this book because while I was reading that one, I couldn't stop thinking about this one. And I didn't have my copy anymore because I loaned it to you, Aiden Weeks. I need it back. Okay, so my issue, I want you to think about this. And then we're going to look up depression too, because I want to see what it says. I have no idea. But my issue since my mom died, my hip has been hurting. I can't sleep. It's been driving me nuts. So I looked it up.
Well, aren't hips, our emotions are stored in our hips, right?
That's what they say. So what she says is hips carries the body in perfect balance, major thrust in moving forward. If you have a hip problem, it's fear of going forward in major decisions, nothing to move forward to, right?
Ooh.
Quit my job. My mom died. Not sure what I should be doing. So then she gives you things to say. And what she says on this is, I'm supposed to say this to myself. I am in perfect balance. I move forward in life with ease and joy at every age. And then, because it's been my left side, I read this and I just so left side of body represents receptivity. I can't say that word. Taking in feminine energy, women, the mother.
Damn.
Yeah. And the thing it says to do if your left side is bothering you, My feminine energy is beautifully balanced, and everything since my mom died has been about that feminine energy. And my hip and my left leg has been throbbing. I know I jumped in with a new book, but let's look up depression.
I think that's awesome. While you're looking up the stuff about depression, what that makes me think, the Louise Hay book you just read from, and there was something else in Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal, that made me think about Tin's book about the chakras.
Me too.
And literally, for those of you who don't know, Tin was one of our guests. She was our very first guest. She's also a friend of ours from high school. And she has written a lovely book about the chakras and the body-mind healing connection. And it made me think about all of that, like literally all of this. Like Tin was in, like literally sitting on my shoulder the whole time that I was reading this, and the whole thing about aligning the chakras and healing blockages and letting energy flow through and healing yourself, not necessarily curing, but healing yourself.
Because we can talk to a therapist over and over again, but we're just recounting, but we're not releasing it from the body. It's not the embodiment that we keep talking about. The many women that we've had on the show that are like, dance it out, jiggle it out, yoga it out, move the body, release it, shake it off, get it out. Okay, exactly. You ready for depression?
Sure, why not?
I'm not going to say this hits right on, but let's see what you think. Depression, anger you feel you do not have a right to feel. Hopelessness. Do you not feel you have a right to be angry, Raquel?
Oh my God. Well, yeah, because okay, a couple things. First off,
because you're always saying, my mommy did the best. I'm not supposed to be angry about that.
Right. That plus being a woman in this society, and being a Southern woman, being raised by a Southern woman who was raised by a Southern woman, women are not supposed to be a certain way. Women are not supposed to express certain emotions. Anger being one of them. Yeah. And so, or like crying in public or any of that. Like, I can't tell you how many times, oh boy, the adults in my family were like, don't let them see you cry. You come home and you don't do this outside. And oh Jesus, I literally remember, this was a few years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember saying to my therapist, I have this deep rage. I'm angry, and I have this deep-seated anger and rage, and I don't know why or where it's coming from or what to do about it or how to express it. And she, God bless her, I probably should have a trauma-informed therapist, but God bless her, she's doing the best she can with me. That makes perfect sense.
Okay, write this down. This is your mantra.
Okay.
From depression. And you're going to put this on your mirror. You're going to look at it every morning and you're going to say it to yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not a man. I now go beyond other people's fears and limitations. I create my life. Say it loud.
I now go beyond other people's fears and limitations. I create my life. And you know what? I think I need to add in there my own fears and limitations as well as other people's, because God knows I got a shitload of those.
When I was reading his book, I just kept thinking, okay, one thing I noticed was that right after I got my divorce, I had the same hip pain. I could not sleep. My hip bothered me. So I knew it was grief. Now, like, the hip pain's back. I'm reading his thing. He's saying how all these things are connected. So I was like, I got to get this book, because his book told me why, but then I needed And so what do we do about it?
Yep. Well, he does go into it, right? Where not as much time spent on it as getting to it.
How come I don't remember what he said? I don't remember anything about what he said.
He talks about the core universal principles of healing.
Okay.
Authenticity.
Oh, yeah.
Agency.
Oh, yeah.
Anger, right? Acceptance, activism, and advocacy. Honestly, I think, hello, Gabor Maté, if you're listening to this, or Daniel Maté, if you're listening to this, this is your next book. Talk about those principles of healing and literally in depth and literally start there and then go into detail. Start there and give a roadmap or a method of applying those principles to ourselves, not just to society, but it starts with ourselves, right? He even talks about that in the book, that it starts with that's why he went from the micro to the macro, right? He started with the family and like pregnant women and in our cells and being in utero. And then he, made his way to society. So start with how we can heal ourselves. But he needs to, and I swear to God, I'm going to tag him and his son when we do the socials for this episode, because I want them to write this book, that those core principles, we need ways to utilize those for our own healing. And maybe somebody has written this book or some version, and listeners, if y'all know of this book, please let us know, because Jennifer and I want to read it and then we want to talk about it.
Yeah. I don't know why I totally blanked on that. I don't remember that from the book at all, but with the first word that you said, authenticity, that is what you described as your intergenerational trauma, was the inability to be authentic through your grandmother to your mother to yourself. Maybe that's the disease of women, because the dis-ease of women is because, again, our moms were going through this feminism, but they were still confined to these roles at the same time. And they didn't really know how to be or who to be. And prior to that, like, let's say in my grandmother's era, if my grandmother came out as this sexually expressive woman, she would have been a downright trollop, right? I bet you she had those same urges within her. I bet every woman through time, because of the essence of our womanhood, I have to imagine that trauma is universal for women.
Yeah.
It is the whole dichotomy of being the innocent, pure versus the seductress.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of put even a finer point on it, my grandma, my mom's mom, she didn't get married. She had 5 kids. She didn't get married. And that time, just being a unmarried woman, regardless of the kid aspect, being an unmarried woman of a certain age during my grandmother's time was a red flag for society.
Well, it'd make her a witch.
Or something. Or a harlot or a Jezebel or whatever other, some other negative label, right? But then not only was she not married, but she had 5 kids, and she was taking care of those 5 kids by herself. Jesus, God, I wish I knew more about my grandmother. I know.
It just opens up a whole...
Yeah, like the trauma that my grandmother must have gone through.
They wouldn't have told us.
This is getting back to another part in book where Gabor talks about ayahuasca and psilocybin and those sorts of things, and psychotropics, but in a controlled way. I wonder, and trust me, I'm thoroughly afraid of psychotropics because I'm afraid that it'll fuck up my brain chemistry.
You don't want to shit your pants and puke all over, and then
No, I'm afraid that it'll be lasting effects, and then I'll be, I don't know, completely messed up mentally, and I won't really be able to take care of myself. But anyway,
yeah, but
that's a whole other story.
aren't the lasting effects showing that it's been good for people's brains?
Well, yes, but I'm just always afraid that that I'm going to be the one that
The one
had
that
the like uber negative effect, right? I had this little like fantasy reading this of, I wish that there was some way that I could communicate with my grandmother and ask her these questions and say, tell me about your life. Tell me about what it was like for you as a woman in your time living the life that you live.
I have that whole thing right now. My mom's memorial for her life is coming up in a couple of weeks, and probably this episode will come out that week. And I need to write her eulogy. And I can write that she was a teacher and that she loved her church and she loved the zoo. And I look back at all the pictures and I can see her holding me and kissing me and loving on me. I don't know jack shit about my mom. Really, like really in depth. Like, Mom, how did you feel when you gave birth? Mom, what was your divorce like? Mom, when people were talking about behind your back and saying that you were promiscuous, but they were not. How did you feel? Mom, how did this feel? Mom, who are you?
Right. But there's so many of us that have that same feeling about our parents because we don't ask those questions.
If we asked, would they tell us?
I think so. Because I think people so much want other people to be interested in who they truly are. They want people to be curious about them and to ask questions. They want to know that other people care enough to go beyond the mask.
I think that the true desire for every single human being, the ultimate desire is to be truly seen and known. And yet,
and to be loved, being fully known.
Right, because we all have this fear that if you truly knew me, you would not love me. But then how can we ever feel truly loved if we don't believe that the person that you love isn't really the real me?
Yeah.
How can we ever truly feel loved? What a mind fuck.
Which goes back to Gabor's book, The Myth of Normal, is that we all are carrying around some version of that trauma. We all are carrying that around in some way.
God, I wish I could ask my mom so many questions. I'd like to know, like, what did that feel like when you found out you were pregnant the first time and you didn't actually know 100% who the father was? Were you scared? Were you raped? Was this just, were you happy to have sex with this man? Were you excited? Was this an exciting, adventurous time in your life? Because you deserve to have adventure, Mom. I hope you weren't raped. I hope you had adventure.
And if she had adventure, I hope that she allowed herself to enjoy it.
But did she?
It's a really huge discussion. It's an important discussion that we all need to have, not just with our parents or other elders in our lives, but with ourselves. We need to go beyond
the surface.
The surface. We need to get rid of this normalized of, oh, we don't ask those questions. The myth of normal has fucked us all up. We need to change the way we go through the world. And I think this is what he's saying toward the end of the book about the universal principles of healing. The first one being authenticity. And we need to not just know ourselves, our true authentic selves. We need to know each other authentically. And we can't do that if we don't get rid of this myth of normal. We don't get beyond it. The toxic culture isn't going to go away if we don't at least start with trying to be authentic.
He said, healing is not self-improvement, it's self-retrieval, authenticity, and agency.
Self-retrieval. I think we all need to do some degree of that.
All right. We have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
ask me something that you've always wanted to know about me, and I will be authentic as possible. And then I'll ask you something that I've always wanted to know about you, and you be authentic as possible.
Okay. Wow. Shit.
I know. I got to think real quick too. I got to think because
Okay.
I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah, I wasn't either.
I just made it up on the fly, people. I made it up.
What is your greatest dream for your life?
Oh God, I wish I knew.
And it doesn't have to be one all-consuming thing, but what is something that you want for you? It doesn't have to be huge, it could be something small, but like you're at a point in your life, you're at a precipice, right? Where so many things have changed. It's probably a little scary, but it's also very exciting. Like your future is wide open.
I think my biggest dream, and this has changed because of everything we just talked about, because of everything in this book, because of my mom's impending eulogy. And this is tough because I have spent years hiding shit. I would like, when I die, for my children to know me. I would like them to be able to say, my mom had issues with perfectionism, and she struggled with that for years, and she worked on it, and she brought that information to us, and she shared with us how much that hurt her, and she shared with us how it messed up her life at points, and she told us all the hard stuff so we could understand her as a human being. I would like that. I would like to, and that is the reason that I have started writing these stories that are intertwined with weird stuff about myself, because I realized I could leave my kids, and I'm including my mom's writing as well. I realized I could leave my kids a legacy of my thoughts, even if we never actually had the conversation, which I hope to have these conversations.
Yeah.
But even if we never have them, I can leave them the legacy of my thoughts. Is that weird?
No, not at all. That is not, oh my God, that is not weird. My entire life, my mom has always said, oh, I'm going to tell you about such and such. I'm going to write this down for you. I'm going to do whatever. She's always said about any number of things. And I'm always like, Ma, write it down. Ma, go ahead. I've given her note, but Ma, do that, write this, give it to me, whatever. And she hasn't. And I really wish my mom would do it. And so the fact that you're doing it for your daughters.
And for myself.
And for you, but Jesus, that is a huge gift.
Every time I write one of those stories, they're intertwined with all sorts of, I don't know, just, they're not simple stories. They pull from childhood. In writing, I've learned about some of my core beliefs that I did, like the one about once on your lips, forever on your hips. I didn't realize that, like, okay, no wonder I never lose any weight, because no matter what I believe, if I eat something, it's like I have believed that for so long. When I write, I learn things about myself that I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And then in turn, I leave that legacy.
I love it.
So it's your turn. It's your turn. We're getting to know each other. Number one, this one's just a joke, sort of, but think about it. If we should go to Peru together and do one of those vision quests. But here's the real question. What is the fear that you hold within you that is keeping you from being your bright light that you are?
Oh, okay.
You don't like this question, do you?
It's not that I don't like it. It's that I'm not completely used to delving into it.
You don't have to talk about it.
No. I'm going to do it because this is what I want. Like I said, people want to know that people want to know about us. It's just that it's hard because I don't have growing up, people weren't like, Raquel, what do you feel about blah, 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 So it's still a new practice for me. I think at my core, I'm afraid that I'm not good enough. And I know this is that huge looming self-limiting belief that me as I am, fully and completely, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not noble enough or kind enough or any of the other things enough, that I'm really not smart enough, or whatever. I mean, there's all the things. There's that feeling of worthlessness. Sounds too big, because I do realize to my core that I have worth, for sure. Maybe this is like from my little kid brain of I'm not good enough, because that's why my dad didn't want to be around, and that's why my mom had the issues that she has had. And I worry that the full true me is not capable of fully being loved, and not fully capable of fully caring for myself and being safe and prosperous and held safely by myself and by society
And another human being.
and another human being. Yeah.
Dude, I'm right there with you.
Wow.
And so proud of you. That's what my whole quest for perfectionism is about.
Yeah.
I think if I can be, and I don't mean perfectionism in sometimes the way other people do, like that my appearance is perfect or my house is perfect. I mean perfectionism in that every word I say has the most impact with my kids, or I say the right thing at the right time, or I do the right thing for the next human being. Like there's any way possible to be the perfect human being.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I guess the only way to be the perfect human being is just to jump in feet first and be like, okay, I'm going to experience being a human being with all its mistakes.
Yeah, and all of its mess.
And
being
all of it.
Human. God damn, being human is complicated and messy.
Yeah. And if you want to make it more complicated, read a book like this. Because...
Right? Oh my God. That'll bring up so much. Damn. All I can say is, people, definitely read the book.
But hold on to yourself.
Buckle up and have a plan in place for somebody to talk to you about it. Like, literally, don't read this by yourself. I think that's the key to reading this book, is to have somebody else read it at the same time that you are, and then make a plan to discuss it. Because reading this book and not having an outlet for all of this shit that gets brought up, I think that is a mistake. Just sitting with all of it that gets drummed up is just setting yourself up for turmoil. You have to talk it out.
And to go back to your point, if you didn't have someone to talk to in childhood, now as an adult, take the onus upon yourself to have someone to talk to about not having someone to talk to. Big love and forgiveness to our parents of that timetable who didn't know how to ask us how we were feeling. They did a lot. They did different than the prior generation. They did a lot. They just weren't there yet.
Yeah, evolution takes time. We're on that journey of evolution just like they were. And who knows where succeeding generations will go with this information that we're bringing to the surface.
Well, that was a good book. That was a good chat. Look
Very
at
good.
you dropping that mask, being all authentic.
Look at me letting people in.
Hundreds of thousands of people who listen to our podcasts, no doubt.
Exactly.
You're letting them all in.
I'm letting people in, baby.
Hey, listeners, if you liked this episode, could you share it with a friend?
Thanks, everyone, for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.